The early morning sun was just beginning to peek through the clouds when Dr. Johnson stepped out of his car in the parking lot of Memorial Hospital. He took a deep breath, adjusting his white coat one more time before grabbing his medical bag from the passenger seat. Today was the day he had been preparing for his entire career, his first day as the new trauma surgeon at one of the city's most prestigious hospitals. He had worked incredibly hard to get here. Years of medical school, countless sleepless nights during residency, and specialized training in trauma surgery had all led to this moment. His mother had called him the night before, her voice filled with pride as she reminded him how far he had come from their small hometown. "You're going to do amazing things," she had said, and he believed her. Walking through the hospital's main entrance, Dr. Johnson felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The lobby was already bustling with activity despite the early hour. Doctors, nurses, and other staff members moved with purpose through the corridors. He stopped at the information desk to get his bearings, pulling out the folder containing his new employee paperwork and the map of the hospital that had been mailed to him. "Excuse me," he said politely to the woman behind the desk. "I'm Dr. Johnson, the new trauma surgeon. Could you point me toward the surgical wing?" The woman barely looked up from her computer screen. "Maintenance requests go through the facilities department on the second floor," she said dismissively, waving her hand in the general direction of the elevators. Dr. Johnson blinked, confused. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here for maintenance. I'm the new doctor starting today." This time the woman did look up, her eyes scanning him from head to toe with obvious skepticism. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked, her tone suggesting she thought he definitely wasn't. "Yes, I'm quite sure," Dr. Johnson replied, keeping his voice calm and professional despite feeling a bit uncomfortable. He held up his hospital ID badge that had arrived in the mail just a few days earlier. "I have my identification right here." The woman squinted at the badge, then shrugged. "Well, the surgical wing is through those double doors and down the hall. Follow the signs." As Dr. Johnson walked away from the information desk, he tried to shake off the odd interaction. Maybe the woman was just having a bad morning, or perhaps she was new and didn't recognize him yet. These things happened in big hospitals where hundreds of people worked. The surgical wing was impressive, with state-of-the-art equipment visible through the windows of various operating rooms. Dr. Johnson felt his excitement returning as he imagined himself working in these rooms, saving lives and making a real difference. He was looking for the chief of surgery's office when a nurse approached him. "Hey, are you here about the broken sink in OR3? She asked, barely slowing down as she hurried past. "It's been dripping all morning and it's driving everyone crazy." "No, I'm actually Dr. Johnson, the new trauma surgeon," he replied, but she was already several steps away and didn't seem to hear him. A few minutes later, another nurse spotted him near the operating rooms. "Oh good, maintenance is here," she said with relief. "We've been waiting for someone to fix that flickering light. It's been bothering the surgeons all week." Dr. Johnson politely corrected her, explaining who he was and why he was there. The nurse looked embarrassed and apologized, but he noticed how surprised she seemed, as if the idea of him being a doctor had never crossed her mind. These interactions were starting to form a pattern that made Dr. Johnson feel increasingly uncomfortable. He decided to head straight to the chief of surgery's office to check in, and hopefully clear up any confusion about his role at the hospital. On his way there, he passed the hospital's cafeteria, where several staff members were having their morning coffee. One of them, an older man in scrubs, called out to him, "Hey buddy, when you get a chance, could you empty the trash cans in the doctor's lounge? They're getting pretty full." Dr. Johnson stopped walking. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm Dr. Johnson, the new trauma surgeon." The man looked skeptical. "Really? You sure you're not the new custodial guy? I could have sworn they said someone new was starting in housekeeping today." "I'm quite sure," Dr. Johnson replied, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. "I'm here to meet with the chief of surgery." Word seemed to spread quickly among the cafeteria staff, and soon several people were staring at him with curiosity and confusion. Dr. Johnson felt heat rising in his cheeks, not from embarrassment about being mistaken for custodial staff. There was nothing wrong with that job. but from the obvious assumptions being made about him based solely on his appearance. He finally found the chief of surgery's office, a corner suite with large windows overlooking the city. The nameplate on the door read, Dr. Patricia Wells, Chief of Surgery. Dr. Johnson knocked and waited. "Come in," called a voice from inside. He opened the door to find an older woman with silver hair sitting behind an impressive mahogany desk. She was reviewing what appeared to be surgical schedules, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Dr. Wells, I'm Dr. Johnson, the new trauma surgeon. I'm reporting for my first day." Dr. Wells looked up from her papers, and for just a moment Dr. Johnson saw the same look of surprise he had been seeing all morning cross her face. But she recovered quickly, standing up with a professional smile. "Of course. Dr. Johnson, welcome to Memorial Hospital. I apologize, I was expecting you a bit later this morning." They shook hands and Dr. Wells gestured for him to sit in one of the chairs across from her desk. "I trust you found the hospital easily enough?" "Yes. Though I have to admit, there seems to be some confusion among the staff about who I am," Dr. Johnson said carefully. "Several people have mistaken me for maintenance or custodial staff this morning." Dr. Wells waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about that. It's a big hospital and people don't always pay attention. I'm sure once everyone gets to know you, there won't be any more mix-ups." Dr. Johnson nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced it was that simple. Something about the way people had looked at him, the automatic assumptions they had made, suggested this might be an ongoing issue rather than simple unfamiliarity. "Let me show you around and introduce you to some of the other surgeons, Dr. Wells continued, standing up from her desk. "We have a great team here and I think you'll fit in well." As they left her office and began walking through the hospital corridors, Dr. Johnson tried to focus on the positive aspects of his new position. This was his dream job at a top-tier hospital. He had the skills, the training, and the dedication to excel here. Whatever initial confusion there might be about his role, he was confident that his work would speak for itself. But as they passed more staff members, Dr. Johnson couldn't help but notice the surprised looks, the double takes, and the whispered conversations that seemed to follow in their wake. He had a feeling that proving himself at Memorial Hospital was going to require more than just excellent surgical skills. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Johnson's first day at Memorial Hospital, and what he had hoped would be isolated incidents had become a daily reality. Every morning when he walked through the hospital doors, he mentally prepared himself for the assumptions and misunderstandings that seemed to follow him wherever he went. It started small, almost too small to complain about. When he stopped by the nurse's station to check on patient charts, the cleaning supplies would mysteriously appear nearby. "Oh, I thought you might need these," a nurse would say with an innocent smile, not seeming to notice the stethoscope around his neck or the medical journals tucked under his arm. During his second week, Dr. Johnson was walking through the main corridor when an elderly patient in a wheelchair called out to him. "Young man, could you please help me find the bathroom?" she asked sweetly. "I've been looking everywhere and I'm getting desperate." Of course, Dr. Johnson helped her. It was the right thing to do, and he genuinely wanted to assist. But as he guided her wheelchair down the hallway, he couldn't help but wonder why she had chosen him out of all the people walking by. There had been 3 nurses, 2 other doctors, and several administrative staff within sight. Yet somehow he was the one who looked like he worked in patient services. The pattern became more obvious during the hospital's monthly staff meeting. Dr. Johnson arrived a few minutes early and took a seat in the middle of the auditorium. As more people filed in, he noticed several colleagues glancing at him with curious expressions, as if they were trying to figure out why he was there. Halfway through the meeting, the head of facilities management stood up to address some maintenance issues. "We've been having problems with the air conditioning in the East Wing," he announced. "I see we have some maintenance staff here today, so please make sure to check those units after the meeting." Dr. Johnson felt dozens of eyes turned toward him. His face grew warm as he realized that once again he was being mistaken for support staff. A colleague sitting next to him leaned over and whispered, "I think he's talking to you." "I'm a trauma surgeon," Dr. Johnson whispered back, showing his hospital ID badge. His colleague looked embarrassed. "Oh wow, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." After the meeting, Dr. Johnson approached the facility's manager to clear up the confusion. The man seemed genuinely surprised to learn that Dr. Johnson was a surgeon, not a maintenance worker. "My apologies, doctor. I just assumed, well, you know how it is. We get so many different people in these meetings." But Dr. Johnson didn't know how it was. He had never seen other doctors being mistaken for custodial staff or maintenance workers. It seemed like a problem that was uniquely his. The incidents weren't limited to hospital staff. Patients' families often made the same assumptions. During his third week, Dr. Johnson was explaining a surgical procedure to the family of a car accident victim. The patient's wife listened politely as he outlined the operation, but when he finished, she asked, "That's very helpful, but when will we be able to speak with the actual doctor?" Dr. Johnson patiently explained again that he was the doctor, showing his medical degree hanging on the office wall and his surgical credentials. The woman looked skeptical, but eventually accepted his explanation. However, her husband pulled Dr. Johnson aside later and asked if there was someone else they could get a second opinion from. "Of course, you can always seek additional medical opinions," Dr. Johnson replied professionally. "But I want you to know that I have extensive experience in trauma surgery, and I'm confident in my assessment of your wife's condition." The man nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. It was clear that Dr. Johnson's expertise was being questioned, not because of his medical opinions, but because of assumptions about who he was supposed to be. These daily encounters began taking an emotional toll. Dr. Johnson found himself arriving at work each morning with a knot in his stomach, wondering what new incident would occur. He started carrying his medical degree and surgical certifications with him, ready to prove his qualifications at a moment's notice. The breaking point almost came during a busy Thursday afternoon. Dr. Johnson was reviewing patient files at the nurses' station when a delivery man arrived with medical supplies. The man looked around the busy area and then approached Dr. Johnson. "Hey, where should I put these boxes of surgical instruments?" he asked. "They told me to find someone who works here." Dr. Johnson looked up from the patient chart he was reviewing. Around the nurses' station were 2 registered nurses, a physician assistant, and the head of the cardiology department. Yet, somehow the delivery man had chosen him as the person who worked here in a capacity that would know about supply deliveries. "I'm a surgeon," Dr. Johnson explained calmly. "You'll want to speak with someone from hospital logistics about those supplies." The delivery man looked confused. "Are you sure? They told me to find hospital staff." One of the nurses overheard the conversation and came over to help direct the delivery man to the appropriate department. After he left, she turned to Dr. Johnson with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. People make mistakes sometimes." But Dr. Johnson was beginning to wonder if these were really mistakes, or if there was a pattern of assumptions being made about him that went deeper than simple confusion. He decided to start documenting these incidents, not because he wanted to cause trouble or file complaints, but because he needed to understand if what he was experiencing was really as frequent as it seemed. Each evening, he would write down what had happened that day, who was involved, and how it made him feel. The list grew longer each week. There was the time a hospital board member asked him to adjust the thermostat during a medical conference. The incident when a patient's family member handed him a $20 bill, thinking he was a hospital aide who had helped move their grandfather's bed. The afternoon when 3 different people asked him for directions to various departments, despite the fact that information desks and hospital maps were clearly posted throughout the building. What bothered Dr. Johnson most wasn't the individual incidents themselves. It was the realization that his colleagues seemed completely unaware of what was happening. When he mentioned these experiences to other doctors, they would nod sympathetically and say things like, "Oh, that's just how hospitals," or "Everyone gets confused sometimes." But Dr. Johnson noticed that no one else seemed to be getting confused about the other doctors' roles. The white-haired surgeon who worked in the next office was never asked to empty trash cans. The young resident, with the blonde ponytail, was never handed cleaning supplies. It seemed like the confusion was specifically about him and what role he was supposed to play at the hospital. As he drove home each evening, Dr. Johnson found himself questioning whether he had made the right decision in accepting this position. He had worked so hard to get here, sacrificing social events, family time, and personal relationships to focus on his medical career. But now that he had achieved his goal of working at a prestigious hospital, he was spending more time proving he belonged there than actually practicing medicine. His mother called one evening while he was reviewing his notes about the day's incidents. "How's the new job going, sweetheart?" she asked with her usual enthusiasm. Dr. Johnson paused, not sure how to answer. He didn't want to worry her, but he also needed to be honest about his experiences. "It's challenging," he finally said. "More challenging than I expected." Tuesday morning started like any other day for Dr. Johnson, but something felt different in the air. Maybe it was the way the autumn wind rattled the windows of his apartment, or perhaps it was the restless sleep he'd had the night before. Whatever it was, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would be significant somehow. He arrived at Memorial Hospital 30 minutes early, hoping to catch up on patient charts before the day got too busy. The emergency department had been overwhelmed the past few days with a flu outbreak, and the trauma unit was seeing an unusual number of cases. Dr. Johnson actually preferred these busy periods because they left little time for awkward encounters or mistaken identities. When the hospital was in crisis mode, people focused on medical expertise rather than assumptions. The morning went smoothly at first. Dr. Johnson successfully completed 2 minor surgeries and consulted on 3 cases in the emergency department. His confidence was building as he worked alongside colleagues who seemed to respect his medical opinions and surgical skills. For a few hours, he almost forgot about the daily challenges he had been facing. Around noon, he decided to take a short break to review some patient files. The nurses' station on the 4th floor was usually quieter than the main areas, and he could concentrate better there. He settled into a chair with his laptop and a stack of medical records, genuinely enjoying the intellectual challenge of complex cases. That's when he noticed Mr. Thompson approaching. Richard Thompson was one of Memorial Hospital's most influential board members, a wealthy businessman who had donated millions of dollars to the hospital's expansion projects. His name was on a wing of the building, and everyone from the chief of staff to the newest interns knew who he was. Dr. Johnson had seen him from a distance during board meetings and hospital events, but they had never been formally introduced. Mr. Thompson was walking briskly down the hallway, clearly agitated about something. In his hand, he carried a mop and a yellow cleaning bucket, and his expensive suit looked oddly out of place with the custodial equipment. "You there?" Mr. Thompson called out as he approached the nurse's station. "I need you to take care of something, immediately." Dr. Johnson looked up from his patient charts, assuming Mr. Thompson was addressing someone else, but when he glanced around, he realized they were the only 2 people in the area. "There's been a spill in the VIP waiting room," Mr. Thompson continued, setting the mop and bucket down next to Dr. Johnson's chair. "Coffee all over the expensive carpet. The donors' meeting starts in 20 minutes, and I need this cleaned up right now." Dr. Johnson blinked, processing what was happening. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Johnson, one of the trauma surgeons here." Mr. Thompson's face showed immediate irritation. "Look, I don't have time for games. I know who works in this hospital, and I need that spill cleaned up before my meeting. The regular custodial staff is apparently busy elsewhere." "I understand you're in a hurry," Dr. Johnson replied calmly, "but I'm not custodial staff. I'm a physician." He gestured to his white coat and the stethoscope around his neck. "Perhaps you could call the facilities department directly?" The suggestion seemed to anger Mr. Thompson even more. His face reddened and his voice grew louder. "Don't get smart with me, son. I've been supporting this hospital for 15 years, and I know every doctor on staff. Now stop being difficult and do your job." Dr. Johnson felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his voice steady. "Mr. Thompson, I've been working here for over a month as a trauma surgeon. I'd be happy to show you my hospital ID and medical credentials if that would help clear up this confusion." "Confusion?" Mr. Thompson's voice was now loud enough to echo down the hallway. "The only confusion here is you thinking you can talk back to me. I don't know what kind of attitude problem you have, but I'm going to report this to your supervisor immediately." Several hospital staff members had begun to gather, drawn by the raised voices. Dr. Johnson noticed 2 nurses, a physician assistant, and a resident from internal medicine watching the confrontation with uncomfortable expressions. He hoped one of them might step forward to clarify the situation, but they all seemed frozen in place. "Sir, I completely understand your frustration about the spill," Dr. Johnson said, trying one more time to de-escalate the situation, "but I'm genuinely not the right person to handle this. I'm a surgeon and I have patients depending on me this afternoon." Mr. Thompson stepped closer, his face now inches from Dr. Johnson's. "Are you calling me a liar? Are you suggesting I don't know the difference between a doctor and a janitor in my own hospital?" The word hit Dr. Johnson like a physical blow, not because there was anything wrong with being a janitor, but because of the venom in Mr. Thompson's voice, the implication that the idea of Dr. Johnson being a physician was somehow ridiculous or impossible. "I'm not calling you anything," Dr. Johnson replied, his professional composure beginning to crack. "I'm simply trying to explain who I am." "What you are," Mr. Thompson shot back, "is an employee who's about to be looking for a new job if you don't pick up that mop right now." The small crowd of onlookers had grown larger, but still no one intervened. Dr. Johnson could see the discomfort on their faces, but also something else that hurt even more, a kind of resignation, as if this scene was somehow inevitable or acceptable. Dr. Johnson looked down at the mop and bucket, then back at Mr. Thompson's angry face. In that moment, he realized that this wasn't really about a coffee spill or a misunderstanding. This was about power, assumptions, and the exhausting reality of having to prove his worth and identity every single day. "I won't be cleaning up that spill," Dr. Johnson said quietly, "because that's not my job. I'm going back to taking care of patients, which is my job." Mr. Thompson's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "How dare you? I'm going to have you fired for insubordination. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, I know exactly who you are," Dr. Johnson replied, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "The question is, do you know who I am? With that?" He gathered his patient files and walked away, leaving Mr. Thompson standing next to the mop and bucket. The crowd of onlookers parted silently as he passed, their eyes following him down the hallway. Dr. Johnson made it to the nearest bathroom before his hands started shaking. He locked the door and leaned against it, trying to process what had just happened. In all his years of medical training, through the stress of residency and the pressure of life or death surgeries, he had never felt as humiliated as he did in that moment. It wasn't just Mr. Thompson's behavior that upset him. It was the silence of his colleagues, the way they had watched the confrontation without stepping in or speaking up. It was the realization that no matter how skilled he was as a surgeon or how hard he worked, there would always be people who saw him first as someone who didn't belong, someone whose presence in a position of authority was questionable or threatening. That evening, Dr. Johnson sat in his apartment with his laptop open, staring at a blank document. He had intended to write another entry in his journal about the day's events, but instead found himself typing the beginning of a resignation letter. He thought about his mother's proud voice when she told her friends about her son, the doctor. He thought about the patients whose lives he had saved and the colleagues who respected his medical expertise. But he also thought about the daily exhaustion of having to prove himself over and over again, and he wondered if it was worth it. His phone buzzed with a text message from his mentor from medical school. "How's the new position going? Hope you're settling in well." Dr. Johnson stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "It's complicated." Dr. Johnson had been staring at his resignation letter for 3 hours. The cursor blinked at him from the screen, waiting for him to finish what he had started. He had written and deleted the same paragraph 5 times, trying to find the right words to explain why he was leaving Memorial Hospital after only 6 weeks. The apartment felt unusually quiet that evening. Even the normal sounds from the street below seemed muted, as if the world was holding its breath. Dr. Johnson had ordered takeout but barely touched it. His mind kept replaying the confrontation with Mr. Thompson, the faces of his colleagues who had stood by and watched, and the crushing realization that his medical expertise might never be enough to overcome people's preconceived notions. He thought about calling his mentor, Dr. Rodriguez, who had encouraged him to take the position at Memorial. But what would he say? That he was giving up on his dream job because of a few misunderstandings? That he couldn't handle the pressure of proving himself? It all sounded so weak when he tried to put it into words. The resignation letter felt like both a defeat and a relief. Maybe it would be better to find a smaller hospital where he could focus on medicine instead of constantly defending his right to be there. Maybe he could join a practice in a different city, start fresh somewhere new where people didn't have predetermined ideas about who he was supposed to be. But every time he tried to type the final paragraph, something held him back. Was he really ready to give up on everything he had worked for? Was he going to let Mr. Thompson and people like him win? Dr. Johnson closed his laptop and walked to the window. The city lights stretched out before him, and somewhere in that maze of buildings was Memorial Hospital, where tomorrow another surgeon would cover his shifts, where his patients would wonder why their doctor had suddenly disappeared. The thought of abandoning his patients bothered him more than any personal humiliation he had endured. He was just about to return to his resignation letter when his phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's number, and for a moment, he considered not answering. Maybe it was administration calling about the incident with Mr. Thompson. Maybe they were calling to fire him before he could quit. But his medical training kicked in. Hospital calls at night usually meant emergencies, and emergencies meant people needed help. He answered on the fourth ring. "Dr. Johnson, this is Lisa from the Emergency Dispatch Center." Her voice was tense, almost panicked. "I'm sorry to call you so late, but we have a situation. There's been a major accident on Highway 95. Multiple cars involved, and we have several critical patients coming in." Dr. Johnson felt his pulse quicken. How many patients are we talking about? At least 8 confirmed, possibly more. 3 are critical trauma cases. We've called in everyone we can reach, but Dr. Harrison is out of town at a conference, and Dr. Martinez is dealing with a family emergency. You're our most experienced trauma surgeon available right now. Dr. Johnson looked at his laptop, where his resignation letter was still open on the screen. An hour ago, he had been ready to walk away from all of this. Now, people were depending on him to save lives. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, already reaching for his keys. "Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I can't tell you how relieved I am to hear that." The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. Dr. Johnson felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with trauma calls, the way his mind automatically shifted into emergency mode. All the doubts and frustrations from earlier in the evening faded into the background. Right now, there were only the patients who needed him and the skills he had spent years developing. He arrived at Memorial Hospital to find the emergency department in controlled chaos. Ambulances were pulling up one after another, their sirens creating a symphony of urgency. Paramedics rushed through the automatic doors with patients on stretchers, shouting medical information to the waiting staff. The scene was exactly what Dr. Johnson lived for. This was why he had become a trauma surgeon, why he had endured years of grueling training and countless sleepless nights. In moments like these, nothing else mattered except saving lives. "Dr. Johnson, thank God you're here," called out Nancy, the head nurse in the emergency department. The same woman who had handed him cleaning supplies just 2 weeks earlier now looked at him with genuine relief and gratitude. "We've got 3 critical patients, and the first one is already in Trauma Bay 1. Dr. Johnson quickly changed into his scrubs and rushed to the trauma bay. The patient was a young woman, probably in her 20s, with multiple injuries from the car accident. Her vital signs were unstable, and she was losing blood fast. The team of nurses and technicians looked to him expectantly, waiting for his instructions. "What do we have?" Dr. Johnson asked, his voice calm and authoritative despite the chaos around them. 23-year-old female, multiple trauma from a head-on collision, reported the trauma nurse. Possible internal bleeding, broken ribs, and a severe head injury. Blood pressure is dropping and she's going into shock. Dr. Johnson examined the patient quickly but thoroughly, his trained eyes taking in every detail. Years of experience had taught him to see patterns in trauma that others might miss. to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. "We need to get her to surgery immediately," he announced. "Prepare her too, and get blood bank ready with 6 units. This is a race against time." As the team sprang into action, Dr. Johnson felt the familiar sense of purpose that had drawn him to medicine in the first place. The patient didn't care about his race or the assumptions people made about him. She only cared that he had the skills to save her life. The second critical patient was a middle-aged man with severe chest trauma. The third was a teenager with internal injuries and a collapsed lung. Each case required Dr. Johnson's full attention and expertise, and he moved between them with the confidence of someone who had trained for exactly these moments. Other staff members who had previously mistaken him for maintenance or custodial workers now looked at him with respect and admiration. The same people who had handed him mops and cleaning supplies were now hanging on his every word, following his surgical instructions with complete trust. Dr. Patterson, the chief of surgery, arrived about an hour into the crisis. She found Dr. Johnson coordinating the trauma response with calm efficiency, managing multiple critical cases simultaneously while teaching the residents and medical students who had gathered to observe. "Outstanding work, Dr. Johnson," she said, pulling him aside during a brief moment between surgeries. "I've never seen trauma management this smooth. You've got everything under control." "Thank you, Dr. Patterson. It's what I trained for." The night wore on. Dr. Johnson successfully stabilized all 3 critical patients. The young woman's surgery lasted 4 hours, but he managed to stop the internal bleeding and repair the damage to her organs. The middle-aged man required emergency chest surgery to repair a punctured lung. The teenager needed immediate surgery to address internal injuries that could have been fatal if left untreated. By dawn, all 3 patients were stable and expected to make full recoveries. The emergency department had returned to its normal pace and the crisis had passed. Dr. Johnson sat in the break room, exhausted but satisfied, drinking coffee and reviewing the night's cases. His phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Patterson. "Exceptional work tonight. The hospital is lucky to have you." For the first time in weeks, Dr. Johnson felt like he truly belonged at Memorial Hospital. Word spread quickly through Memorial Hospital about the remarkable work Dr. Johnson had done during the emergency. By the time the morning shift arrived, everyone seemed to know about the 3 lives he had saved and the calm leadership he had shown during the crisis. For the first time since he had started working at the hospital, people were talking about him for the right reasons. The young woman from the car accident was his most challenging case. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a teacher at the local elementary school. When Dr. Johnson checked on her the next morning, she was awake and alert, surrounded by worried family members who had driven through the night to be with her. "Are you the doctor who operated on me?" Rebecca asked weakly when she saw him enter the room. "Yes, I'm Dr. Johnson. How are you feeling this morning?" "Like I got hit by a truck," she said with a small smile. "But the nurses tell me I'm lucky to be alive. They said you saved my life." Her mother, a woman in her 50s with tears in her eyes, stood up from her chair beside the bed. "Doctor, we can't thank you enough. When we got the call about the accident, we thought we were going to lose her. The other doctors told us how skilled you are, how you knew exactly what to do." Dr. Johnson felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with recognition or praise. This was why he had become a doctor. These moments when his years of training and dedication resulted in a family staying together, a young woman getting a second chance at life. "I'm just glad I could help," he said simply. "Rebecca has a long recovery ahead, but she's young and strong. I expect her to make a full recovery." As he left Rebecca's room, Dr. Johnson noticed something different in the hallway. Staff members who passed him nodded respectfully, some even stopping to congratulate him on his work the night before. The same nurses who had previously handed him cleaning supplies now greeted him warmly and asked his opinion on patient care. The change was most noticeable in the trauma unit. The other surgeons, who had previously seemed distant and skeptical, now sought out his expertise on difficult cases. During the morning rounds, Dr. Patterson asked him to lead the discussion on trauma protocols, acknowledging his experience and skill in front of the entire surgical team. Dr. Johnson's management of last night's emergency was textbook perfect, she announced to the group. I want everyone to pay attention to his approach because this is how we handle multiple trauma cases. Later that afternoon, as Dr. Johnson was reviewing patient charts in his office, there was a knock on his door. He looked up to see Mr. Thompson standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable and significantly less aggressive than he had during their previous encounter. Dr. Johnson, could I have a moment of your time? Dr. Johnson gestured to the chair across from his desk, curious about what the hospital board member wanted to discuss. Mr. Thompson sat down heavily, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like embarrassment. I owe you an apology, Mr. Thompson began, his voice much quieter than it had been 2 days earlier. I heard about what you did last night, how you saved those people's lives. I also heard that you're one of the most skilled trauma surgeons this hospital has ever had. Dr. Johnson waited, not sure how to respond. He had never expected an apology from Mr. Thompson, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to accept one. I made some terrible assumptions about you, Mr. Thompson continued. I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment, and I treated you in a way that was completely unacceptable. There's no excuse for my behavior. I appreciate you saying that, Doctor, Johnson replied carefully. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. Mr. Thompson nodded, then leaned forward in his chair. I want to do more than just apologize. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I realize that if I made those assumptions about you, other people probably have too. That's not acceptable in an institution like this. Dr. Johnson felt a spark of hope. Maybe something good could come from all the difficult experiences he had endured. What are you suggesting? He asked. I want to work with you in the hospital administration to address these issues, Mr. Thompson said. We need training programs, policies that ensure all staff are treated with respect regardless of their background. We need to make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Over the following weeks, Dr. Johnson found himself in a position he had never expected. Instead of being the target of assumptions and discrimination, he became a leader in changing the hospital's culture. Mr. Thompson, true to his word, used his influence on the board to implement comprehensive diversity and inclusion training for all staff members. The training sessions were eye-opening for many people. Nurses, doctors, administrators, and support staff all participated in discussions about unconscious bias and the importance of treating colleagues with respect. Dr. Johnson was asked to share his experiences, and while it was difficult to relive some of those moments, he knew it was necessary for change to happen. I want you to understand, he told one group during a training session, that I never expected special treatment. I just wanted to be seen for who I am and judged on my abilities as a physician. Every person who works in this hospital, regardless of their role, deserves that same respect. The changes weren't just limited to training sessions. The hospital implemented new policies to ensure fair treatment of all employees and created reporting systems for staff who experienced discrimination. They also established mentorship programs to support healthcare professionals from diverse backgrounds. Dr. Johnson's reputation as a surgeon continued to grow. He was invited to speak at medical conferences about trauma surgery techniques, and other hospitals began recruiting him for leadership positions. But he decided to stay at Memorial Hospital, partly because he felt a responsibility to continue the work he had started in changing the institution's culture. 6 months after that terrible confrontation with Mr. Thompson, Dr. Johnson was asked to serve on the hospital's board of directors. It was an honor that recognized not only his medical expertise but also his leadership in making Memorial Hospital a more inclusive and respectful workplace. Rebecca, the teacher he had saved during the emergency, made a full recovery and returned to her classroom. She sent Dr. Johnson a card signed by all her students, thanking him for giving their teacher back to them. It was a reminder of why he had chosen medicine in the first place. The other patients from that night also recovered completely. The middle-aged man returned to his job as a firefighter, grateful for a second chance to serve his community. The teenager went back to school and eventually decided to study medicine himself, inspired by the care he had received. Dr. Johnson kept his resignation letter saved on his computer, not as a reminder of a moment of weakness, but as a symbol of how close he had come to giving up on something that mattered deeply to him. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not in operating rooms, but in the everyday interactions that shape how we treat each other. Looking back, Dr. Johnson realized that while the discrimination he had faced was painful and wrong, it had also led to positive changes that would benefit countless others. The hospital was now a place where all staff members could focus on what they did best, taking care of patients, without having to constantly prove they belonged there. And, in the end, that was all he had ever wanted.